Ukraine just did something Russia said was impossible. In less than 72 hours, Ukrainian forces punched through defenses Russia had spent months and billions building. Not one position, not one village, 590 square kilometers recaptured, confirmed by Zelensky himself. Russia's summer plan didn't just fail, it collapsed. And what happened inside those 72 hours is a story that rewrites everything you thought you knew about this war. If you follow this conflict seriously, if you want analysis that goes beyond the headlines and actually explains what's happening on the ground, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. This channel exists for people who want the real picture. Let's get into it. Earlier this year, something dangerous was happening inside Russian military headquarters. Confidence, not cautious optimism, not measured planning. Real, top-down, this is already won confidence. Commanders were standing over maps, moving pieces into place, believing they had finally assembled the kind of force that could dictate the next phase of this war. The vision was clean. Break through southern Ukraine. Secure the east. Force terms on Kiev before summer ended. They believed the math was on their side. And on paper, the math looked right. Russia repositioned the 58th Combined Arms Army, one of its most powerful formations, directly into the Zaporizhzhia sector. They brought the 42nd Guards Motor Rifle Division with them, supported by heavy Soviet-era armor. The VDV airborne units, Russia's supposed elite, were kept at ready. The 810th Naval Infantry Brigade was pulled from Crimea and pushed toward the front line, and at the edges of the assault, Russia deployed Storm Z penal battalions, convicts given rifles and told to walk into Ukrainian fire. Expendable, designed to absorb casualties and find the soft spots. From Moscow's perspective, this looked like overwhelming force, but there is a specific kind of danger that comes with certainty in war. It makes commanders stop asking the right questions. It makes them assume the map will match the battlefield. It makes them build plans around what they expect the enemy to do, rather than what the enemy is actually preparing. Russia stopped asking the right questions, and Ukraine had been preparing for exactly that. Here is what made Ukraine's response different, and what most coverage gets wrong. This was not a counteroffensive in the traditional sense. Ukraine did not mass its armor and charge across open ground. It learned that lesson in 2023, when it lost dozens of vehicles to Russian minefields in daylight assaults that gained almost nothing. Those losses were painful, but they were studied. Ukraine adapted. By 2026, Ukraine had built something different, not a hammer, a scalpel. The offensive began between May 17th and May 20th, targeting the Mala-Tokmachka-Bohatyrska axis in Zaporizhzhia. This stretch of terrain matters because of geography. The high ground there shields Russia's southern supply routes. Lose it, and the corridor below becomes vulnerable to Ukrainian fires. Keep it, and Russia retains a protected spine for its entire southern operation. Ukraine's 118th Mechanized Brigade moved at night. No spectacle, no massed formations, darkness, discipline, and months of preparation. For weeks before the attack, Ukrainian FPV drones had been quietly mapping the battlefield. Not just flying over it, studying it. Trench layouts, bunker positions, ammunition storage points, movement patterns, guard rotations. Every piece of intelligence was cataloged. Every weakness was marked. When the attack started, that intelligence became a weapon. Drone swarms flooded Russian airspace above the contact zone, not scattered, not random, but coordinated. Simultaneously, Ukrainian electronic warfare systems cut Russian communications. Soldiers inside fortified positions suddenly had no orders, no contact with command, no awareness of what was happening on their flanks. They were physically inside their defenses, but effectively blind. Then precision artillery hit the positions the drones had marked. Western-supplied systems, accurate to meters, not kilometers. And then Ukrainian infantry moved through the gaps. Small teams, cross-covering, systematic, no unnecessary exposure. The 42nd Guards Motor Rifle Division, one of Russia's most prepared formations in the region, could not hold. The 71st and 291st Regiments withdrew. Ground Russia had publicly described as near impenetrable was abandoned within hours. By May 20th, Mala, Tokmachka, and Bohatyrska were Ukrainian. But here is why that matters beyond the map. Those two villages opened a direct approach toward Tokmak, one of the most critical logistics hubs in Russia's entire southern operation. Once Ukrainian long-range artillery can threaten Tokmak, every Russian unit south of it has to start calculating something uncomfortable. How long until supplies stop arriving? Ukraine did not stop. Between May 20th and May 23rd, pressure expanded west towards Zaliznyshny, a village near Huliaipol that sat inside a wider Russian defensive web supporting the whole sector. The 118th Mechanized Brigade attacked again, this time with the 65th Mechanized Brigade on the flank. But before the infantry moved, Ukraine dismantled the logistics. FPV drones flew night missions, not against fortifications, but against supply vehicles. Convoy after convoy was hit on the roads behind Russian lines. Ammunition trucks, fuel vehicles, resupply runs that Russian defenders in the front positions were depending on. When shells stop arriving, a fortified trench is just a hole in the ground. Once the supply network broke down, Ukrainian forces moved in. Artillery softened the northern edge of the village. Drones tracked Russian movement in real time. Ukrainian infantry went in fast and deliberately. Zaliznyshny fell. Days later, Rykadub, northwest of Zaliznyshny, also fell. That meant something bigger than two villages. It meant Ukraine had seized the initiative in the sector. Russia was now reacting, patching gaps, rushing reinforcements to positions it had assumed were stable, defending terrain it had assumed was secure, and there was a deeper lesson embedded in what happened. Russia's expensive defensive belt, months of digging, fortifying, and reinforcing, began to collapse not because Ukrainian forces overwhelmed it from the front, but because Ukraine cut the arteries feeding it from behind. Minefields and concrete barriers are only as strong as the system sustaining them. Sever the supply, sever the air picture, sever the communications, and what's left is isolated defenders waiting to be picked apart. That is a different kind of warfare. And Ukraine had mastered it. Let's stop and focus on the weapon that made all of this possible, the drone. Not as a buzzword, as a battlefield revolution happening in real time. In eastern Ukraine, near Kostiantynivka and Drushkivka, Ukraine's 47th Mechanized Brigade, supported by elite unmanned systems units, was conducting a different kind of campaign. Not against frontline positions, against the infrastructure keeping Russian forces alive. Ammunition depots, fuel storage, convoy routes, rail links. A single drone flying 40 kilometers behind Russian lines at night, finding a fuel truck on a dark road and destroying it before any Russian radar has identified it. That's not dramatic footage. There's no explosion the size of a building, no tank burning on an open field. It's quiet, precise, and cumulative. Now multiply that strike by hundreds. Spread it across the entire front. Sustained over weeks. Armies don't only collapse when soldiers are killed. They collapse when the fuel stops, when the shells don't arrive, when units are physically present on the map but functionally unable to fight because they have nothing left to fight with. Russia was experiencing exactly that. Then on May 23, 2026, Ukraine struck something that sent a visible shock through even Russian military circles. Near Oleshki, on the eastern bank of the Dnipro, Russia had established a drone command facility. This site was the eyes of Russian artillery across the river, feeding targeting data, tracking Ukrainian positions, directing fire. Ukraine destroyed it with a coordinated swarm of next-generation FPV kamikaze drones. The operators inside were gathered at the facility when the drones arrived in successive waves. 15 experienced Russian drone operators were killed. The facility was destroyed. The reaction from Russian military bloggers was immediate and unusually candid, effectively confirming the loss and acknowledging how significant it was. When your own side's commentators can't hide the damage is real. Now let's zoom out, because what happened in those 5 days in May is not just a battlefield story. It is a strategic turning point. The Tokmak-Melitopol corridor is the spine of Russia's entire southern position. It is the overland route that keeps Russian forces in southern Ukraine fed, armed, and connected to Crimea. Every Ukrainian gain in Zaporizhzhia moves long-range Ukrainian artillery closer to that corridor. And once that corridor is under sustained and accurate fire, everything south of it begins to come apart. Think about what that means. More than 40,000 Russian troops are stationed in Crimea. Every shell, every tank of fuel, every meal, every replacement part for every vehicle they operate comes through land-based supply lines. Ukraine does not need to storm Crimea. It needs to make those supply lines untenable. Force Russia to operate with less. Force commanders to choose between defending the corridor or reinforcing the front. Make every decision a bad decision. That is the strategic trap Ukraine has set. And Russia's options inside that trap are genuinely bad. Strip forces from Donetsk to reinforce Zaporizhzhia and risk stalling the eastern offensive that Putin has publicly committed to. Pull troops from Crimea or Kherson to stabilize the south and create new openings along the Dnipro. There is no clean move. There is only the choice of which problem to make worse. Ukraine designed that dilemma deliberately. By applying pressure across multiple fronts simultaneously, it has prevented Russia from ever concentrating enough strength in one place to dominate. Russian forces are stretched, increasingly dependent on undertrained replacements, and defending more territory with less capable soldiers than at any point since the early phases of the invasion. The image of war that most people still carry in their heads is wrong for this conflict. Massed armored columns, tanks racing across open plains, territory decided by overwhelming firepower. That image is fading. What is replacing it is something different and in many ways more ruthless. Small infantry teams moving at night guided by live drone feeds from above. Precision artillery controlled by soldiers watching the strike in real time on a tablet screen. Swarms of cheap, expendable drones that can find, identify, and kill a target 40 kilometers behind the front line before any human operator can respond. The side that adapts to this reality faster wins the ground war. In May 2026, Ukraine demonstrated it has adapted. Russia demonstrated it has not. The 590 square kilometers Ukraine recaptured are not just a number. They are written on the map. They are the abandoned trench lines Russia built and lost. They are the command posts that went silent. They are the logistics hubs that stopped functioning. They are the positions Russia publicly called impenetrable, now flying Ukrainian flags. Russia entered this summer believing it had momentum. Ukraine proved it didn't. This is one chapter in a war that is still being written, but this chapter matters because it shows which side is learning faster. And in this kind of war, the side that learns faster is the side that survives. The summer campaign is not over. The war is not over. The next phase is already forming. And when it breaks, you want to already understand the context that built it. If this breakdown gave you clarity that the mainstream coverage didn't, share it with one person who's trying to follow this conflict. It takes 3 seconds, and it puts serious analysis in front of someone who needs it. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay close. The next update is coming, and it will matter.